He ordered me to sign. I signed, but not his document. When a man like that thinks he controls you, let him believe it. Then let your signature burn down his $20 million contract. The pen he shoved across that mahogany desk became his own weapon. He never bothered reading what I actually signed. Pride makes men blind, and blind men don't see the match being lit right under their nose. That's how you destroy someone who thinks power comes from intimidation. You hand them exactly what they demand, with one tiny, devastating difference. My name is Camille Hartley, and at 37, I'd finally made it to where I wanted to be senior contract analyst at Argonne Systems, one of the most prestigious defense technology firms on the East Coast. The promotion had come just 3 weeks ago, after I'd successfully navigated a $40 million acquisition that everyone said would fall through. My corner office on the 12th floor still smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Then Dean Maris arrived. The email came on a Tuesday morning at 8:45 a.m. sharp. Please welcome Dean Maris, our new Executive Director of Operations, transferring from the D.C. office to lead our restructuring initiative. That word restructuring sent ice through my veins. In corporate America, it's never just about moving furniture. By lunch, the whispers had started. Monica from legal cornered me by the coffee machine, her voice barely above a breath. 12 people in 3 months, she said, glancing over her shoulder. That's his track record in D.C. They call him the surgeon he cuts deep and doesn't care if it bleeds. I first saw him during the all-hands meeting that afternoon. Expensive suit, graying temples, smile that never reached his eyes. He spoke about operational excellence and streamlining redundancies, while his gaze swept the room like a predator cataloging prey. When his eyes landed on me, they lingered a second too long. The first sign of trouble came exactly 1 week later. I was reviewing a draft contract for our biggest international client, a South Korean tech giant worth $20 million annually. Something was off. The warranty clause had been altered. Where we'd previously guaranteed 99% uptime, it now read 99.9%, a seemingly tiny change that would cost us millions in penalties we couldn't possibly meet. I traced the revision history. Dean Maris, last edited yesterday at 11:37 p.m. My hands trembled as I printed the original version and the modified one. This wasn't incompetence, it was sabotage. No one changes decimal points in a warranty clause by accident. I knocked on his door, documents in hand. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his laptop. "Mr. Maris, I noticed some changes to the Kim Industries contract. Did you—" He finally raised his eyes, that cold smile playing at his lips. "And the warranty terms have been modified in a way that exposes us to significant liability. I think we should—" "I think," he interrupted, leaning back in his leather chair, "that you should focus on your assigned tasks. Ms. Hartley, contract strategy is above your pay grade. But sir, I'm the senior analyst on this account. It's literally my job to—" "Your job is whatever I say it is." The smile widened. "Send me the final version by 5 p.m. No more changes." I stood there, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. This wasn't about the contract. This was about power, control, and something else. Something personal I couldn't quite identify yet. That night, I stayed late, poring over every document Dean had touched since arriving. A pattern emerged, subtle changes that benefited specific third-party suppliers, warranty terms that set us up for failure, delivery schedules that were impossible to meet. Either Dean Maris was the most incompetent executive in corporate history, or he was deliberately setting up Argonne Systems to fail. My phone buzzed at 9:15 p.m. An email from HR marked urgent. Performance review meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mandatory attendance. I'd had my annual review just 2 months ago. My stomach churned as I realized what was happening. The surgeon had chosen his next patient, and I was already on the operating table. The performance review was a masterclass in corporate assassination. Dean sat across from me, flanked by Janet from HR, a woman who'd always smiled at me in the elevator, but now wouldn't meet my eyes. Between them lay a folder thick enough to hold my entire career, or what was left of it. "Camille," Dean began, his tone dripping with false concern, "we need to discuss some troubling patterns in your work." "What patterns?" I kept my voice steady, though my pulse hammered in my ears. He slid a paper across the table. 3 client meetings you weren't present for last week. Because you told me I was no longer needed in those meetings. I have your email stating, I said you could prioritize other tasks. I never said to abandon client relationships. He turned to Janet. Note that difficulty following instructions. Janet's pen scratched across her notepad. I wanted to scream. The next hour was a blur of fabricated infractions. My reports were lacking strategic vision, despite receiving praise just weeks before. My communication style was not aligned with new management direction. Even my years of stellar reviews were twisted into evidence that I'd plateaued in my development. This is insane, I finally snapped. I've been with this company for 8 years. My record speaks for... Your record is exactly why we're having this conversation, Dean interrupted. You're stuck in old patterns, resistant to change, maybe even... He paused, savoring the moment. Undermining new initiatives. There it was, the real accusation, delivered with surgical precision. After the meeting, I stumbled back to my office, my hands shaking as I closed the door. My assistant, Trevor, knocked almost immediately. Camille, you okay? I let him in. His face was pale. They've locked me out of the Kim Industries files, he whispered. Said all international contracts are being reassigned to Dean's team from D.C. My computer dinged. A new email from Dean, copying half the executive team. Effective immediately, all senior analysts must have their work reviewed by operations before client submission. This is to ensure quality control during our transition period. Quality control, right, more like evidence tampering. Over the next 2 weeks, the noose tightened. I was excluded from strategy sessions. My parking space was reassigned to a visiting consultant, and my reports came back bleeding with red ink corrections that made no sense, changes that actively worsened our position. When I pushed back, I was labeled difficult and not a team player. Then came the final twist of the knife. Margaret Chen, our CFO and my longtime mentor, called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon. Camille, I'm worried about you, she said, and I could see she meant it. Dean's been sharing concerns about your stability. My stability. She winced. He showed me emails where you're questioning basic contract terms, arguing about standard procedures. He thinks you might be overwhelmed by your new position. Margaret, you've known me for... I know, she held up a hand. That's why I'm telling you this. He's building a case. Camille, a strong one. Whatever's really happening here, you need to be careful. Document everything. That night, I sat in my home office until 3 a.m., creating a parallel universe of evidence. Every email Dean sent, every altered document, every impossible deadline, I backed it all up to a private server. I started recording our meetings on my phone, legal in our state with single-party consent. The pattern was becoming clear. Dean wasn't just pushing me out, he was ensuring that when I left, I'd take the blame for whatever was about to go wrong with our international contracts. The $20 million Kim Industries deal was set to implode, and my signature was on every document. By Friday afternoon, I knew I had 1 week, maybe 2, before Dean made his final move. The whispers in the hall confirmed it. I wasn't the first analyst to be targeted, just the highest ranking. Others had quit under pressure or been terminated for mysterious performance issues. But I wasn't going to run, and I wasn't going to break. If Dean Maris wanted to play surgeon, he was about to learn that sometimes the patient knows exactly where to cut back. My salvation came in the form of Melanie Soto, my law school roommate who'd gone on to become one of the city's sharpest commercial contract attorneys. We met at a wine bar downtown on Saturday evening, far from Argonne's sphere of influence. Show me everything, she said, pushing her glasses up her nose, a gesture I remembered from our study sessions 15 years ago. I slid her a USB drive containing weeks of evidence. For the next 2 hours, she scrolled through documents, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Jesus, Camille, this isn't just wrongful termination, this is corporate fraud. These contract modifications. He's setting up your company to fail while funneling money to these shell suppliers. Can we prove it? We can prove he altered the contracts, but proving intent... She drummed her fingers on the table. That's harder, unless... Unless what? A slow smile formed on her lips. What if we just let him bring himself down? Has he asked you to sign anything yet?
Not yet, but Margaret warned me it's coming.
Good. When he does, we'll be ready. She pulled out a legal pad and started sketching. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to prepare your own version of whatever document he wants you to sign. Something that looks identical but contains key admissions. When the moment comes, you'll switch them. Is that legal? He's going to fire you illegally and frame you for contract fraud. We're going to let him think he succeeded while documenting his confession. It's not entrapment if he's already committed the crime. We spent the rest of the weekend preparing. Melanie helped me craft several versions of potential documents, resignation letters, performance improvement plans, even termination agreements. Each contained subtle language that would expose Dean's scheme if he signed off on them. The key, Melanie explained, is to make the changes invisible to a quick read, but devastating under legal scrutiny. Corporate executives like Dean never read what they think they've written themselves. Monday morning arrived like a gathering storm. I found my keycard deactivated at 7:30 a.m. I had to wait for security to manually override it, a petty power play, but it told me the endgame was near. Throughout the day, I maintained my routine while secretly preparing my defense. I uploaded crucial files to multiple secure servers, sent encrypted copies to Melanie, and created a detailed timeline of Dean's actions. My phone, tucked in my jacket pocket, recorded every interaction. The preparation became almost meditative. I organized my evidence into folders: contract alterations, email threats, witness statements, financial irregularities. Trevor, my assistant, slipped me copies of memos I'd been excluded from. Other analysts who'd suffered under Dean quietly forwarded their own experiences. By Wednesday, I had enough evidence to bury Dean Maris, but I needed him to make the first move. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday morning, 11:15 a.m., Dean's assistant called. "Mr. Maris would like to see you in conference room C." Not his office, a conference room. Official, witnessed, final. I gathered my things slowly, methodically, in my portfolio. Hidden between legitimate contracts were 3 different versions of documents Melanie and I had prepared. Each one looked professional, standard, exactly what Dean would expect to see. As I walked down the hallway, I caught my reflection in the glass, composed, professional, ready. Dean thought he was about to perform his final surgery. He had no idea the patient had already prepared the scalpel. My phone was recording. The portfolio was ready. 3 years of exemplary performance reviews sat in my desk drawer next to 8 weeks of Dean's systematic destruction. I knocked on the conference room door. "Come in," Dean called, his voice carrying that satisfied tone of a predator who believes the trap has already sprung. Game on. The conference room was staged like a courtroom. Dean sat at the head of the table, Janet from HR to his right, and a man I didn't recognize, probably legal, to his left. A single document lay face down in front of an empty chair. My chair. "Sit," Dean said, not bothering with pleasantries. I sat, keeping my portfolio on my lap, hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Camille, we've reached a difficult decision." His voice oozed false regret. "Your recent performance issues, combined with your resistance to new operational procedures, have left us no choice." "I see." I kept my tone neutral, professional. Let him think I was beaten. He flipped the document over and slid it across the table. "This is a voluntary resignation agreement. Sign it, and we'll provide 2 weeks severance and a neutral reference. Refuse." He shrugged. "We'll have to proceed with termination for cause. Your choice." I picked up the document, scanning it quickly, standard boilerplate, except for one paragraph that made my blood boil, an admission that I'd failed to properly manage the Kim Industries contract, taking full responsibility for any errors or omissions in the documentation. "I need a moment to read this thoroughly," I said. Dean's jaw tightened. "You have 2 minutes." I opened my portfolio, angling it away from their view. My fingers found the document Melanie and I had crafted identical to Dean's version in every way except for 3 crucial insertions. Where his version said, "I failed to properly manage." Mine said, "I was instructed to improperly alter." Where his mentioned errors or omissions, mine specified, "changes demanded by Dean Maris despite my documented objections," and buried in the legal language was a new sentence, This resignation is submitted under duress following threats to destroy my professional reputation if I refuse to sign fraudulent contracts. The switch took 3 seconds. I'd practiced it dozens of times. I need a pen, I said, my voice catching just enough to sound defeated. Dean smiled a predator's smile and slid his Mont Blanc across the table. Make the right choice, Camille. I signed my name with a flourish, dated it, then pushed both document and pen back to him. I'll need a copy for my records. Janet will email you one, Dean said, already sliding the document into a folder without looking at it. Why would he? He'd written it himself. Clear out your office by 5 p.m. Security will escort you. I stood slowly, clutching my portfolio. Before I go, there's something you should know. Dean's eyebrows rose mockingly. Oh. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a thick manila envelope, setting it on the table with a solid thunk. Copies of every altered contract, every impossible deadline, every email where you instructed me to violate company policy. The originals are with my attorney, and duplicates have been sent to 3 separate locations, including one that will automatically forward to the SEC if I don't check in every 24 hours. The color drained from Dean's face. The legal representative reached for the envelope, but I held up a hand. There's more. That document I just signed. You might want to read it again, carefully this time. Dean yanked the folder open, his eyes scanning the page. I watched the exact moment he found the changes. His face went from pale to purple. This isn't you can't. I can and I did. You just signed a document admitting you forced me to resign under duress after I refused to participate in contract fraud. I pulled out my phone, showing the recording app still running. And I have our entire conversation on tape, legal in this state, as I'm sure your counsel can confirm. The lawyer was frantically flipping through pages, his expression growing more horrified with each paragraph. Janet sat frozen, her pen still poised over her notepad. You're finished here, Dean snarled, half rising from his chair. Yes, I am, I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But so are you. That $20 million contract you've been sabotaging, the one with the impossible warranty terms, Kim Industries' legal team is expecting a call from me at 6 p.m. tonight, unless, of course, you'd prefer to explain to the CEO why you've been deliberately torpedoing our biggest international client. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Dean, that visiting consultant you gave my parking space to, he's actually a forensic accountant. Melanie hired him 3 weeks ago. He's been tracking every shell company you've been funneling money to. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off Dean's explosive response. But I could hear it all the way down the hall, the sound of a predator realizing he'd just stepped into his own trap. Security was waiting at my office, but I didn't care. Everything important was already gone, backed up, documented, and delivered. The real show was about to begin. The call came at 6:47 p.m., just as I was settling into my couch with a glass of wine. Richard Blackwood, Argonne's CEO, a man I'd only seen during quarterly all-hands meetings. Ms. Hartley, I need you to explain what the hell happened today. Which part? I took a deliberate sip. The part where Dean Maris forced me to resign, or the part where he's been sabotaging our contracts. Kim Industries just called. They're threatening to pull out. $20 million. Camille, their legal team says the warranty terms are impossible to meet. I tried to warn Dean 3 weeks ago. He told me contract strategy was above my pay grade. Silence. Then, you have documentation of this. I have documentation of everything. Mr. Blackwood, including Dean's instructions to alter the contracts and his threats when I refused. I also have evidence suggesting this isn't about incompetence, it's about money being redirected to specific suppliers. I need to see everything, tonight. I'll be there in an hour, but Mr. Blackwood? You might want to have your general counsel present, and someone from the FBI's white-collar crime division. The next morning, Argonne Systems looked like a crime scene. Federal agents wheeled out boxes of documents while employees whispered in clusters. Dean's office was sealed with yellow tape. I sat in the executive conference room, surrounded by lawyers, FBI agents, and a shell-shocked executive team. My evidence covered the table contracts, emails, financial records, recorded conversations. The forensic accountant Melanie had hired presented his findings: 2 shell companies receiving kickbacks from the modified contracts, both traced back to accounts controlled by Dean Maris. "How long have you known?" Richard Blackwood asked, his face gray with exhaustion. "I suspected after the first week. I knew for certain after the second. I started documenting everything immediately." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I met his gaze steadily. "Because Dean made sure I'd look like a disgruntled employee trying to save my job. He poisoned the well, made sure any complaint would seem like retaliation. I needed him to make the first move." The general counsel, Patricia Winters, held up the resignation document Dean had signed. "This is remarkably clever." He authenticated his own confession. "Ms. Hartley had excellent legal advice," Melanie said from her seat beside me. "We made sure everything would stand up in court." The FBI agent, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, looked up from her notes. "We'll need you to testify. This goes beyond Argonne. We found similar patterns at his previous companies." "The surgeon," I said quietly. "That's what they called him. Cut deep and didn't care if it bled. Turns out he was performing surgery on the contracts, not just the staff." By noon, the story had leaked. My phone buzzed with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and headhunters. I ignored them all. There was still work to be done. Kim Industries needed reassurance. In a video call that afternoon, I walked their legal team through the original contract terms, showed them Dean's alterations, and provided a timeline for restoration. Richard Blackwood personally apologized and offered to renegotiate with the original terms, plus a 5% discount for the inconvenience. "Ms. Hartley," the lead Korean executive said through the translator, "we appreciate your integrity. It is rare to find someone willing to risk their career for principle." "I didn't risk my career," I replied. "Dean did that for me. I just made sure he signed his name to it." The call ended with the contract intact, $20 million saved. That evening, as I was packing up the temporary office they'd given me, Trevor appeared in the doorway. "They arrested him," he said quietly. "Dean, at the airport. He was trying to fly to the Cayman Islands." I felt no satisfaction, just a bone-deep weariness. "Good." "Camille, thank you. He was starting to target me too, making me falsify reports. I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly what you should have. You survived until someone could stop him." More people came forward over the following days. Dean's systematic destruction had touched dozens of careers, destroyed promising futures, shattered confidence. But now, finally, it was over. The FBI seized his assets. The shell companies collapsed. 2 other executives who'd been taking kickbacks were arrested. The investigation would take months, maybe years, but the immediate threat was gone. And Dean Maris, the surgeon who'd carved up so many careers, was about to learn how it felt to be on the operating table himself in a federal courtroom, with 12 jurors holding the scalpel. 3 weeks later, I walked back into Argonne Systems not as an employee, but as something far more powerful: an independent legal consultant and the prosecution's star witness. My ID badge now read Special Investigator, granting me access to every floor, every file, every secret Dean had tried to bury. The executive team had arranged a war room on the 15th floor, away from prying eyes. Boxes of evidence lined the walls. Federal agents worked alongside Argonne's legal team, piecing together the full scope of Dean's crimes, and at the center of it all, I sat with my laptop, my documents, and my recordings, the architect of Dean's downfall. "We found 12 more shell companies," Agent Mitchell announced during our morning briefing, "all registered in Delaware, all receiving payments from modified contracts across Dean's previous positions. This goes back 6 years, maybe more." Patricia Winters, Argonne's general counsel, looked sick. "How did no one catch this?" "Because he was surgical," I said, pulling up a spreadsheet I'd created. "Never too much from one company, always just below audit thresholds, and he made sure to destroy anyone who got too close to the truth." The evidence was staggering. Dean had stolen approximately $3.7 million across multiple companies, always using the same method: modify contracts to create unnecessary expenses, funnel money to shell companies, eliminate anyone who questioned the changes. The surgeon indeed. But the real bombshell came from an unexpected source. Janet from HR approached me during a lunch break. her hands shaking as she handed me a USB drive. "I kept copies," she whispered. Every performance review Dean fabricated, every termination he orchestrated. I knew it was wrong, but he said he'd destroy my career if I didn't comply. The files were damning. 43 employees across 4 companies, all forced out using the same playbook: fabricated performance issues, impossible deadlines, systematic isolation, and in each case, Dean's signature authorizing the harassment. "You'll testify?" I asked. She nodded, tears streaming. "I should have spoken up sooner. All those people." "You're speaking up now. That's what matters." The investigation expanded. The FBI brought in forensic accountants who traced money through offshore accounts. They found connections to suppliers who'd been overcharging for years, splitting the excess with Dean. They uncovered emails where Dean discussed his retirement fund with co-conspirators. And through it all, I remained at the center, translating corporate speak for federal agents, explaining contract law to prosecutors, identifying patterns others missed. My 8 years at Argonne had prepared me for many things, but never this becoming the key to unraveling a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Richard Blackwood called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. The bags under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights and boredom.